So yeah, hi everyone. Okay, so from this video we will start writing our project. So firstly, what we will do, we will try to create our backend. So let's start to create first our Flutter project. So what the command for that? Flutter create our project name, YouTube portfolio. Okay, YouTube portfolio app. It will create our project, basic project, Flutter project. Inside this project, what we will do, we will create one more folder that would be a backend where we will write our node part and see how we will create a CRUD API for our project. Fine. Okay, fine. So let's redirect our backend repository directory cd. Okay. There is no directory. Why this is? Because we have to redirect first our main project into portfolio and then we can redirect our backend. So what are the pre-requirement to write our backend is that, so firstly we need to install a Node.js. So we go on Node.js.organization and download the node according to your platform, and then you have to install MySQL. We will use MySQL for our database. So go on this website developer.mysql.com and install this according to your system, and then we will use exam. So you can download this also. So once you downloaded these three things, we will go to write our backend part. So let's start writing our backend part. Okay, fine. Now once you have installed all those things, so let's initialize npm in our project. So we are on backend directory. So what we will do, we will write a command npm init. So basically npm is a package manager which will initialize the default packages what we want to use on application. Let's suppose like in Flutter, if you are building some project and let's say you are working on a Google Authentifier base, then you need to work with some kind of a package. So you used pubspec.ml and use pub.get to add that dependency. Like that only in Node you have to use npm to install any third-party packages which we can use inside our application. So what we are doing, we are initializing our npm, our backend part. So what we will do, this will ask a bunch of a question. So as of now we will, okay, let's name our package name. What we can give, let's say it's our YouTube portfolio app, right? And version local press enter. We will not give any description as of now. Okay, hit enter, and this will create a default. If you check here package.json file, there are default things are here. Like if you compare with your pubspec file, there are the name of your default file, description, and all the version of your project, like that. Only in your go on a package.json, you will see the name of your project, the version, description. If you want to give the main file would be index.js file where your app would be started. Fine. So I hope you understand what is the npm initialize part. So let's define the folder of our backend. We will see how we can do this. So let's start creating our folders. So our first folder would be domain, and then we have our controller. Okay, we should have our data part, and then also we have our routes. And what we will do, let's define our main file, that would be app.js. Okay, this would be a file. Let's delete it, it would not folder. Let's create a file called app.js. This would be our initial file which will be run. So what we will do, we will change the main file here to index.js to app.js. Fine. Inside routes, let's define our let's create our routes file here where we will define our whole routes which we will use in this project. Let's name is as project routes.js. We are using JavaScript, so extension for this is .js. If you use TypeScript, then the extension will be TS. Okay. Now inside domain part, we will create our new file, that new folder, that would be entities, where we will define our entities, whatever we will use inside this project. And then we have another folder, use cases, what action we can perform inside this project. So we will define this use cases there, entities here. Now inside data part, we have our repository. Okay, let's create a folder here called data source, where we will call the actual method to interact our server data source. And we also have our repository implementation part, repository. Okay, repositories, and we should also have our model part, product model part, you can say. Okay, let's define one more folder called models. So okay, now let's try to create a new file inside our entities. What could be entities inside our project? As of now, we can think that we should have a one entity, that would be our project. So let's create a file called project.js. Okay, we have our app file inside route. We have one file route and project routes.js. In our domain part, we have one entities project.js. Let's create first use cases that get all of our projects. So let's name the first use case is as get all projects. Okay, get all project use cases .js. Okay, we will define some more use cases in later part, but as of now we can think that we should have a one use case, that is get all projects. Okay, so let's create our repository here, repository project repository. Let's create a file called project repository implementation repository.dot. We will not use abstract class yet. And inside model, we could have our project model.js file. project model.js, and inside data source, let's define our data source file project data source.js. So we define our folder structure of our project. We have okay, we miss one thing, that is controller. This is one of the main part. Here we will define our controller. Let's define it. Create a file called project controller.js, and we could also have a folder called config, where we will define our localhost database password environment there in our config file. So let's create a config folder. Inside config, we could have one file, that is database.js. So that's it. So basically what we did, we defined, let's collapse it, see one by one. Okay, we have our main project, YouTube portfolio app. This is a Flutter project. Inside Flutter project, we create a folder called backend, where we will write our backend codes. Here we will use Node.js with MySQL database. Fine, and we will use JavaScript, except we are not going to use TypeScript in this project. We will use JavaScript for this project. So in our backend, we define the folder structure of our project. We create a config folder, where we will define our file, that is database, where we will define all the database stuff, like where we will define what the host we are going to use, what the username of our host, uh, what the port number we are going to use. Those stuff we will define inside our database.js file. Then we have our controller file, where we will say define our project controllers here. Then we have a data. Inside data, we have a data source part, models, repository. Okay, we mistake it. Let's make it .js file. We mistakenly keep it as dart file. Now we have inside domain layer, we have entities and use cases. Inside entities, we have one entity as of now, that is project. In use cases, as of now, we have one use case. And we also have a folder called routes, where we will define all the routes which we are going to use on this project, and our main file, that is app.js, where our project would be start. Fine. Okay, let's create one more file, that is environment file, where we will define all the environment variable. Okay, so let's try to create it. Okay, let's me try to create .env file here. Okay, .env. Here we will define all the environment variable here, like what the database host we are using. We will give the variable name, whatever we use, and the value of that particular thing. So environment variable, this is basically database saying that we define a variable called database host, and we give a value localhost. This will take as a string. So we will define all those variables here. So from our upcoming video, we will start writing our code. Okay. Hi everyone. So in this video, what we will do, we will write our first Node app. So let's start install our first dependency, that would be a Express. We are using to Express module to create our API. So to add new dependency or new package, you can use a command called npm install and the dependency name. In our case, we don't want to use Express, then you can use npm install Express. Fine. Okay, if you want to some more, like in Flutter, you have pub.dev. In Node.js, you have a dependency called npm.js.com. Here you will find all the third-party dependency which you can use in your project according to your use cases. So you are going to use this one, Express module, to create our API. Once you hit this command npm install Express, this will install npm package in our project. You can see inside your package.json file, you have one dependency, that is Express, and the version number of this package. Like in pubspec.yaml, once you install a new package, that dependency is added inside your pubspec.yaml. Like that only in Notepad, your dependency is added here. And you have one more file called package log.json file. You can see all the dependency which are required for this project could be found here. Like you install Express module here in your project, then your Express module could be dependent on some more other modules. So those stuff you can find it here. Like in Flutter, you have two files, pubspec.yaml, your project dependency would be here. Inside pubspec.log, your all the dependency would be here, which are be dependent on this in this file. I hope you understand. Okay, so let's start our first hello world program. So in Flutter, what we have to do in Flutter or another project, what we could do, once we install any dependency, we imported it. Fine. Like that, we will import our Express module. Like we will say define a variable called Express, and we will say we need require of this module Express. Fine. Once we do that, okay, what we have to do, one more thing is that you have to start your local server. So for starting that, what you can do, open your exam app and then go to your application, or there would be manage server. You can start your all server from here, and then come on welcome tab, and now tap on go to application here, and now you can tap on php my admin. This will open your localhost and will start your server locally. Fine. Once you do that, you complete that step, we will start. See here inside our code, what we are doing, we are calling our Express module here. Now we have our Express. Let's create our file. import this module const express. Now we will import return object of this express module. Okay, so let's what we have to do next. Okay, we want listen app to listen our application on a particular port number, app dot listen, and here we will define the port number. Let's say we want to listen our application on this port number 400. Fine. The next thing is what? Okay, let's try to add a print statement here, console log hello world. Fine. Okay, now one more thing is that we will start one more dependency, that would be nodeman, to start our application, npm install nodeman. This the main advantage of using nodeman is that we do not need to restart again and again to change to see the changes, what the changes we did in our project. Once you install this nodeman library, this will be added inside our json file, and now you can use the nodeman command to start our project. You can use nodeman start. Okay, this will start your project. You can see that error const express is equal to this one, and express has already been declared. Okay, you can see here. Okay, we have to use app here, or whatever the name we want to call our dependency. Okay, because we can't name the same variable two times. Okay, let's see. Once you save it, your node1 will be run, and you can see we have hello world in our terminal. So let's see what we have on our here. We have our localhost active on 4000 port number, but we do not have any API. So let's start our first API, that is get. Let's add a method in our express app dot get method, and the path would be initial. We do not give any variable there, and then there are one other element is request and response. What we will do, we will send response dot send hello world. We want to print this in our browser. So we have our express app here. In express as we are using our get method. The route of our get method is simple, or in you can say base URL is, we are not using any variable, so this would be our local host only. And now we do not need to use a request parameter, so we have a two parameter, request and response, and we are saying that simply show the hello world in our browser. So let's see what is there now. You can see our hello world is printed over here. So from next video we will start implementing the actual part of our code. So I hope the basic part is clear. So from the next part we will start writing our entities, our controller, our major stuff of our project. So that's it for this video. So yeah, hi everyone. In last project we see how we can write a hello world program in our Node.js application. Okay, so let's start defining our domain part. So in our domain part we will start writing our entities first. So as of now we could have our one entity, that is project.js. We created a file for that called project.js. Let's define our entity class. So we will name our class is projects. Okay, in JavaScript you do not have you cannot define a data type of your variable. Like in Dart you can define the data type of your variable while you defining your entities, but in JavaScript you could not do that. You can do in TypeScript, which is a subpart of, you can say, JavaScript, where you can define a data type of your fields, or you can say the object, but in JavaScript you can't do that. So what we are doing here, we define our entities project. So we declare a class called projects. Let's define our first constructor. So we'll use a keyword called constructor. Okay, this will take us some parameter, we will define there. Fine, and this is our first constructor. So now let's define the parameter which can be inside our project entity. So we could have a project ID. We will declare the another parameter that could be a title, and we should also have our description of our project. So we will define another field, and we could have a image of our project. We could have a project URL so that we can redirect to that particular project, and we could have a project category, which category of that particular project. So we can use a filter in our client side project. So we will define our entity. We declare class project. In class project we have constructor where we declare ID. This could be, there would be a total of 6 field: ID, title, description, this one, this one, this one. So let's initialize also, that we can say that this dot ID could be ID like this, and let's copy paste it 7 times, and we will change with title. This is the second parameter, and third one was description. This if you come from Dart you can see that is similar kind of that only, how we create a constructor in Dart. The main difference is that only in Dart we could also define a data type while defining our constructor and their field, but in JavaScript you could not do that. So our first entity is ready now. Let's save it. Okay, let's now our this server is running itself because we are using a node. So we have our first entity project, we have some fields inside our entities, we declared our constructor there. Fine. The next part would be our let's declare our repository here. We have a project repository. Let's create a class called project repository. Let's create a class called project repository. Okay. Okay, as of now, let's say we have one method called get all projects here. Okay, this could be a synchronous method because we have to call our server. So I declared it as a async method. We will not define, we will firstly define our use cases. So once we have this project repository, we have one method as of now, get all projects. Okay, let's come on our use cases. We have one use case which hi everyone. In this video, we will define our data layer. Okay, in our data layer, we have a repository and our data source and models. So what we will do, let's define our repository first. So we define a class called project declare class repository, and in our class repository, we would have our method to get all of our projects. So we'll name it get all projects. Okay, and this would be asynchronous because we have to talk with server, so that it could be in future. So we'll use as asynchronous tick. Okay, so now we have to talk with our server, then we have to make a connection with our database. So let's create a class called our data source, project data source. In our project data source, we have to make a connection with our MySQL database. So let's create a connection for that. So we will use a different file for that. We will not make inside our data source part. We will use a config folder. Inside config, we will define our database connection part. Fine. So what we have to do, so there are some requirement also, like we have to use a MySQL. So we have to import MySQL dependency inside our project. How we can do that? We can use npm command for that. Npm install and the dependency name. So let's see. Okay, let's see what we want to use. We want to use const MySQL in the variable name, and we want this require this and our dependency name. So what we have to use? We have to use MySQL to go on this my npm package. Okay, here you have the package name which we have to use it. So in our case, we have to use MySQL to with promise. Okay, so we imported this dependency, then we have to npm install. Okay, once you installed it, go to use this. Come on our database file, we have to create a connection. So we'll use a let's create a connection by using a MySQL. Already MySQL create pool. Okay, and we will store this is in variable called pool so that we can export this. Okay, let's export also, and we have to use module dot export and the name. By using of this, we can use this in our other file. other files. Okay, so here we are using mysql.create pool. This will take a map, and there will be some parameters which we need to define, like we have to give the host name while we making a connection with our database. We have to give a username, password, database, those stuff. So what we will do, we can define directly here and give the value. And we have another option is that we can create an environment file where we will store all those our variable is on that file, and we'll use from there. So what we will do, we will create a .env file which we have already, and we have the first variable, that is dbhost, and declare the value of our hostname. Okay, now we will, what we will do, we will define the another variable, like we will define our database user, that is default root. Okay, now another variable could be database name, let's name it as portfolio app. And another variable could be database password, and let's name it, as of now what we will do, we will not give any specific password for our database. Okay, and the next thing we can do, that we can define the port number of our app where we want to listen to our products. And the next thing is database port number, let's make it 4306. So these variable we define inside our environment file. Okay, now we can read inside our database. For reading environment variable in our file, what we have to do, we have to import one more module, .env, which we can find here over here, .env. So we have to install this first. So what we will do, npm npm install, and what the variable name is, a package name was .env. So simply install it. Once you install, you can use inside your project. So we'll use this inside our database creation part. We are saying that we also required the .env module so that we can use the variable from that particular file. So we will configure it here. Fine. So the next step is that let's give the value here while creating a pool. So first value could be our host name. So where this is, we will define from our environment file, that is process environment, and our database host variable. Okay, so let's give the another field, that is user. We'll copy this and just replace this database host with database user variable. And another field is password, which we do not have any. So what we will do, we will see that please use this environment password if there is any, db and password. Okay, if you have some password of your database, then you can define inside your env file, that would be read here while creating a connection from the code. Okay, the next thing, we can give the database which we want to access, which will read from our env file, that is also database name. And some more variable, that is the port number. This is also we can read from our env file port, and we can also give the by default port number. If we are not getting any port number from our env file, then this will be assigned to our project. Okay, so the next thing we can define, that is we have to wait for connection or not. So we will make it true so that we can wait for it. So let's make it true. Okay, the next thing we can define is that there are some connection limit. How much is that we can define here. So as of now we can give it 10 maximum connection limits. Okay, and at the end we can also define a queue limit. So let's make it 0. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7 field, and define assign all the values while creating a connection with our database, so we can talk with our project. Fine. So let's come on our data source part. Inside our data source part, what we will do, we will define two methods. First for select query, and the second would use for modify anything our existing database. So let's define our first method, that is execute select query. Okay, this would also be asynchronous method because we have to talk with our server. So we can use a create connection, which we created here and exported with pool name. So what we will do, we will import it here, that file const, and store inside this variable const. We are saying that this is required on this file, and this is defined where in config. Okay, we have config folder. Okay, let's see, we have config and our database. We import this file, and now we can use the pool method here. Pool use here whatever the method we define here. Inside pool we can use a query method to perform any select query, and this will take a two parameter, that is query and the parameters which we want to perform. So let's make it with two parameters, that is queries and parameters, and also pass inside while performing action with our database. And this would be future, so we'll mark as await, and at the end once we got the output we will return it. Okay, the next method we will copy this, that would be execute modification query. Okay, this will also take our query which we want to perform on database, and the parameters, you can see that And let's suppose you have to update something on our field. You can add one query and the parameters which we want to update. So we will use a method called execute in our database, pool.execute with this query and the parameter, and at the end we will return it. And we will also export this module from a module export module.exports. Okay, we have database here. Let's name it project data source. So we defined our data source part. Okay, so let's come on our repository, project repository. We have declared one method, that is get all projects. Okay, so now we can use in our data source part here in our repository. So how we will do that? Firstly, we need to import this. So what we will do, we will require what we need to require. We need to require our data source, and the file name is project data source, and we will store this inside a variable called mysql data source, or whatever you want to name it. You can do that. So we have this mysql data source. Okay, now what we can do, we can use this to call the method which we want to perform mysql data source. And in your data source you will see that you have a method execute select query. Okay, this will take a two parameters, execute select query. This will take query and parameters, so we need to pass that. So firstly we have to create the query. So let's make a variable called query, and here we will define the query. So what we have to do, we have to return all the project which we are available on a particular table. So for that, what the query we can use, select star means all the things from where, from our projects table. We are saying that please select whatever the things is available inside the project tables. This is the query which we want to perform. So we'll pass this query in our data source method, that is execute select query. Okay, which we defined earlier. And basically this is asynchronous method, so we will mark as await and store the output in our rows object and assign this, and once we get it we will return the our response from here. Fine. So we have, let's do one more thing. Let's import this, now let's export this, so we can use this one in other files also. Export, and we can name it project repository. Fine. Once you do this part, now what we can do, we can start writing our controller, those stuff. We can define the controller here, we can define our routes. In the next part we will define our routes and controller. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the upcoming video we will defining our controller and routes. Thanks. Fine. In our last video we define our data layer part. So in this video what we will do, we will define our controller and the routes. So we have our controller folders. Inside controllers we have our project controller.js file. So basically controller would be talk with our use cases. So from our app.js file we will not use use cases directly, we will use all the methods by help of controller. So let's define our class project controllers. Okay, now we give a class which name a project controller. Fine. Now what we have to do, we will define the constructor of our class. Okay, let's define the constructor of our class. This class, what this could be take, this could take our use cases. This constructor is basically dependent on our domain layer use cases. So as of now we have only one use case, that is get all project use case. So we will use that inside while defining our constructor get all projects use case. And once we completed that, we will export this controller so that we can use inside our app.js file or whatever the file we want to use. So as of now we have only this. Okay, the one use case. So in future if we have some other use case like create project, so we will add it later. So but as of now we have this only. So now what we will do, export this controller. So how we can do that, module dot exports and give the class name and whatever the name you want. Okay, so in our controller we have one method, that is get all projects, because we have to call the use cases here. That was get all project which we define at domain layer, and we know that is asynchronous, so we will define this as a asynchronous. So and this will take a request and response to pass as a parameter when we call with our database when it data layer data source part get all project. Okay, but in get all project scenario we do not need to use request part in our use case. So let's what we will do here, we will call this use case method which we defined over in our use case execute, which you can see here. We have get all project use cases here. There we will define execute method. Let's rename it execute. Okay, you can use this inside your controller. So we have a constructor of our class. Okay, then we have get all projects method here, and inside this project we are calling the method by helping of this our get all project use case. Okay. Okay, and what we can do now, as we know that this is future, so we will mark is await. Okay, and store the value in variable called projects. Fine. And the next thing what we will do, we will change this response in JSON format, so the client side easily can use. So we will pass request.json. This is response, not a request, because we are using response. And simply what we will do, and we can do one more thing, is that we can add this code in try catch if we are getting some error. So we will handle that. We will add inside our try catch block. Okay, try catch, this will take an error and will return it. We will add this one inside a try block, and in our error block what we will do, we will return response. Okay, in our error part we will return response status, and the status code would be 500, and we return JSON object, and there would be one field that would be error, and we will see that as of now internal server error, and we'll pass this error which we have here. Okay, and what we have to do, we have to use like this. Okay, so what we are doing, we are using get all project method here. Inside get all project we are calling our project use case clause, and in there we have execute method. This will execute our query at data source layer part, and if we are getting response, then we are returning this project in our JSON format. If we are getting some kind of error, then what we will do, simply we will return this 500 with JSON internal server error with respective error. Okay, so let's try to understand our routes parts, where we will define all the routes, or you can say that all the API endpoint where the client side can access our database. Fine. Okay, so let's come on our project routes file. So we will use our express module here to create a routes of our project. So what we will do, so firstly we have to import the express module. So we have to import it like this. We have to require express. Once we got this, we will create an instance of a router from express. So what we will do, we will add one more variable that would be const router, and this will get from where, our express module. So we have our router instance of a router class. So what we will do, we will export our method module.export. This will take our dependency. Basically in our dependency we will register all our controller of our project and the different services which are required for our project. So we have our express module, and we have our instance of our router, express router, and then we are exporting our method which expecting our dependency. Okay, so now what we will do, we will get the project controller from this dependency. Okay, so how we will do that, we'll use this object and use the project controller. Fine. The next thing what we can do is that we can define a different route of our project. As of now we can have a get method, and the endpoint we are saying that we will give as get. Okay, and we will assign the method with project controller. And as of now, what the method we can give, inside our project controller we have get all project method. Over here we have, if you go inside project controller here, there you can find a method get all projects. So we will this, and will bind with our controller object which we get from this exported method. Fine. So as of now we have this one route get, where we are binding this get all project method. Okay, and finally what we will do, we will simply return our router object. Fine. So that's it for this video. In the next part what we will do, we will see how we can use this all the things inside our app.js file, and we create the first get method API in our project. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. In our last video we defined our project controller. So what we will do in this video, we will start writing our app.js file. We will connect with our routes and see how we will get our first get API. So let's remove all these things. Okay, remove, we can also comment it here. We will remove it. So firstly what we are doing, we are importing this module express module and create our express app. Like we import express memo and create express app. Now what we have to do, we will import a middleware that is course, which is basically very useful in that scenario. If you want to restrict, if you want to let's say you want to restrict to call your API from some other domain, so you can do by using course. Okay, so we will use this library require and we will import it. So for that what we have to do, we have to install this. So let's change my directory first into portfolio, and now I have to go on backend npm install course. Okay, so I installed this package, I can use this. Fine. The next thing what we have to do, you have one question, what are middleware? So you can imagine middleware is like, let's say you are on a restaurant and you order some kind of a food. Okay, so basically food is a like of a let's you are on any browser and you are making some kind of a request, http request, that is like you order some food on restaurant. Okay, and now on that particular restaurant chef are preparing your food, so that thing you can imagine as a the web part where your API code is written. Okay, and then while you ordered some food and when you get some food, there are some tasks we additional tasks we can perform. So those things you can think as a middleware, which are basically validate something. Fine. So I hope you understand what the middleware are. So we have Express framework, we have a course. Now we create our Express app. Okay. Now we will use course. So we will use app. Use what we have to use. We have to use course in our project. So we can proceed further. What we have to do, we have to also use one more middleware, that is app dot also use express dot json. Uh, let's say you are creating a new project and you want some request from user side, so you need to convert those requests in a proper JSON format so that you can read inside your controller as a request.body. So for that you have to use this request express.json. Fine. Once we have done this, now the next step what we can do is that we can change our port which we are listening from here directly 4000. What we can do, we can give port here, we can define a variable called port which we will get from our environment file. So process env dot our port number, otherwise we will get it as a 4000 and we will use this variable inside our port. And once we connected, what we will do, we will simply log it on our console that we successfully connected to our database or server. You can say server is running on this port number where we will, okay, where server is running on this port. So let's get the variable that is port we have to use. Okay, fine. So next thing what we have to do, we have to create our routes. We have to call our routes. Okay, so what we will do, we will use app.use. What we have to use this time, we have to use our routes. So what we will do, we will give a base URL of our API. What we will do, this give as projects, and the next thing we will call our project routes here, which we defined earlier in the previous video. Project routes. So what we have to do, we have to import this project routes from our routes file. So let's add it. So what we have to do, project routes, and this is where we have to give the location of that particular file. So this is basically inside our routes folder, routes, and the file name was project routes. Okay, so we have this project routes, and inside our project routes, if you see the method we exported is it's taking a dependency. Okay, so we have to provide that also. In dependency, what we have to provide, we can provide the our project controller. Okay, so let's project controller, we can provide this. So we need to initialize this also. So for that, let's create a new variable called project controller. Okay, okay, let's create a object of our project controller over here. So let's do that. Define a class called project controller. Okay, and this project controller, create a class, and this will take some parameter. So we have to also import this project controller first, then we can use this. Okay, so for that, at the top, let's import project controller file. Okay, okay, let's project controller and give the path of our controller file. We have controllers config, requires, we have controllers, inside controllers we have project controller file. Fine. So let's use this over here. Project controller, create object of our project controller class. Now what we have to do, this project controller class expecting one use case, that is get all project use case. Okay, so let's do that. For that, what we have to do, we have to also import our use cases here. So what we can do, project, now first use cases was get all project use case. You can see inside domain layer, if you come here and get all project use case, simply copy the name of your use case and paste it here. and now we have to import this file where this is inside our domain layer. So let's call it our domain part, domain. Then you have use cases, and then we have get all project use case. Okay, so let's create we can create an object of our get all project use case over here. Okay, let's create an object of our get all project use case. Okay, let's, and this, if you see, get all project use cases required project repository, so we need to import this also, project repository. So at the top, what we will do, we will copy. Okay, now we have our get project all use cases object. Okay, so this is required project repository in the constructor. So what we have to do, we have to also import project repository over here at the top of our file, so we can use our use case. So if you come over data layer inside project repository, copy the name of the file and simply create over here and give the path of our data layer, data, and there is a repository and the file name project repository. Fine, let's create an object of our project repository, that is project repository, and name it as project repository. Okay, this use cases will take a project repository as a parameter, and our project controller will take a one use case, that it got all use cases. Okay, so let's see one more time what we are doing here. We are importing our express module, then we are importing our course module as a middleware, then we are importing our routes, project routes over here, so that we can use inside our project. Then we are importing our project controller, then we have our get all project use cases module, then our project repository. After we creating our express app here, and then we are creating an object of our repository, get all project use cases. Repository is not anything sign. Then we are using app.use, there we are passing calling a course method here, so that after that, what we are doing, we are using app.use express.json method over here, and then we are calling our project routes with project controller, and we are passing as a dependency, and the base URL we are saying that projects. Our API endpoint would be something like this, projects, and the whatever the endpoint which we define, like we have get method defined in the project routes, right? So the endpoint would be project slash get, and the base URL where we deployed our project. Okay. So let's now try to run our node mod. Okay, and make sure that your server is running over here, otherwise we will not able to see that. So let's run a command nodemon dot start, and see we are getting an error, cannot find module mysql to slash promise. Okay, where we are getting over here. Okay, let's see we have inside our package.json or not. We have this mysql to promise, and see, let's see why we are getting this error. Okay, so basically what we did wrong, we imported a wrong dependency. So let's clear first, and let me install our package npm install mysql 2, and once we get this, we are good to go. Let's now try to run command nodemon and start. Now we are getting some other error, is that invalid configuration option passed in connection database. This is currently a warning, but in future, okay, we are getting an error, is that an error will be thrown in project repository class constructor. Project repository can't be invoked without a new. Okay, so we have to use a new keyword over there. If you see here in our project repository where we are exporting our module, we have to use a new keyword. Okay, let's see, waiting for changes. Okay, let's start it more time. Project repository backend app.js line number 12, we are getting this error. So let's add a new keyword over here, and app is waiting for a file change. So let's rerun. Fine, we are getting an error that is project repository cannot be invoked without new keyword. So let's see what the wrong is. Okay, if you come here, we have to remove this parenthesis from here because we are using new keyword, and we have to use new here. Okay, let's try to check now. Now it's saying that get all project users cannot be removed without this. So we have to add new keyword for each while we creating each object from project repository, our use cases, and project controller. So now let's try to see we do not have any error. If we come on this page, then we are getting an error. Okay, we are getting an error, get add info not found. Okay, you can see there is vmesh l. So we have to add inside our environment file, db host should be localhost. We spell it wrong. And if you try to refresh, and let's come on database, also we will check this create connection part. We have a host, we have our user, we have our password. Okay, we spell it here wrong. We have to add a database name, then the port, here we will add a database port. And let's try to rerun one more time and see what the thing we are getting. So it's saying that portfolio app is not identified. So what we have to do, we have to create a database on your local host with this name portfolio app. or whatever the database you define there, name defined there. So we are defined database name portfolio app. So let's come on over here, and there we have already created a portfolio DB database over our local host. So what we have to do, we have to just rename this portfolio app to database. Okay, once you renamed it, then we have one table over here, that is projects, and I added some project over there. Fine. So let's try to refresh one more, save it and try to refresh one more time our local host and see we are getting a response or not. So as you can see, we are getting a proper response. We are getting all the JSON. We can test by using a postman. Let's come on postman, and we will paste our localhost endpoint and try to hit our API, and we will see we are getting a proper response. So in the next part, what we will do, we will write our another use cases, that would be create a project, new project, and how we can update our existing project, and how we can delete that existing project. Okay, so in the next video we will cover that. So that's it for this video. Okay, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. In our last video we completed our get part. Okay, so in this part, what we will do, we will write another use cases to create a new project in our database. So for that, what we will do, we will start writing use cases at our domain layer. So let's define the file, let's create a new file called create project use cases.js. Okay, so now here what we will do, we will define our first use case and second use case, that is create project use case. Okay, now let's define a constructor for our class. This will also take project repository similarly like in this our scenario. So we will copy the same code from here. In our constructor we need a project repository. Okay, so in our use cases we should also have one method. We could also have one method to execute that particular use case, like in our get all project use case. So let's define one more method over here to that is execute. That would be asynchronous method, and at the end what we will do, we will export this module.exports and give the name. It's like that. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to in this use case we have to create a new project. So for that there are a requirement of entities over here. So what the entities we need over here in by creating a project, that would be project. So we need a project entity to perform this action, create project use case. We could not perform this action without project entity. So let's import this, add this. What we will do, we will add our project entity over here at the top and import it like this. What we have to do, we have where the entities is, this is at a domain layer, and we will import entities, and the entities, the particular entities is project. Okay, in our execute method, what the parameter which are required, that would be id, let's say that is the id, and then title, let's say description, image url, and project url, and we have another field that would be project category. Okay, so now here what we will do, we will create a new project entity. Let's name it constant. Let's give us a constant, and we will name the variable as a new project and create an object of that entity. And then inside our project entity we will give the value which we getting from over there here, like id, and we have to use a new keyword to create an instance of that object. And the second parameter is title. Over you can see in our project entities we have a 5 things in our project constructor: id, title, description, image url, project category. So we have this use case, and we have this constructor. In constructor we inquired project repository, and then we have a method that is execute. Okay, here we will call our repository, and in execute there are some parameters which are required: id, title, description, and here we are creating a object of our entity project, and we'll add all the data over here which we will get from our controller: image url, project url, and project category. Fine, now we have a new entities of our project. So now what we can do, we can call our data repository part here. What the repository, this repository, we will call it here, and the method, let's say that is create project. We need to define this, and this will accept a parameter that would be into our project entity. So we will pass over this newly created entity. So now the next step, what would be the next step would be we have to we have to create a new method in our repository, that is create project. So once we call this, we have to also return this method. Okay, so now let's come on where we have to on our repository file, project repository, and here we will define another asynchronous method that would be create project, which we are using over in our side our use cases, that is create project. See, this is, we have to declare this. Now what we have to do, we have to define our query to create that, and after we are good to use that. So inside our create project use this use case, and we know that this is required entity, that would be a project entity, because we have to create a new project. So what we have to do next, we have to make a query. This would be our query. and we have to call our method from our data source. This would be a synchronous method, so we have to add await keyword over there, and if you come over here, there we have another method to execute modification query. Okay, so we will use this because we are adding a new project over there. So here what we will do, we will pass our query, which we will write and the parameters. Fine, these two things we need to pass. Now we do not have a parameter, so we will do declare over here. So for query, what we have to do, we have this project entity, so we will create a new variable object like this, and we will assign our project over there and give all the fields, title, description, whatever which we have inside our this entity, project entity. If you come over here, project, let's define one by one. Project description, no sorry, the next one was description, and after that we have image URL, and then we have project URL, and then we have project category. Okay, these are the URL which we have, these are the field which we have: title, description, image URL, ID, and also we have ID. We have to also define the ID. Okay, we also have this ID, so we have 6 field now. Okay, and we are doing some mistake over here. Let's see what that is. Now we have to add parameters, so let's define a variable called params, and these parameters we will get it from the object which we created here. So let's add it one by one. We can directly copy all the fields from and paste it here. Okay, so now we can define our query over here. Our query would be, we have to insert a new project in our projects table. So what the query would be, for query would be insert, what we have to insert, and where we have to insert into projects table. Okay, and give all the keys which we have to insert. These are all the keys. We will copy it over from there. This is the query, and then we have to provide values of those. Okay, this is, we have to use a, do not have to use a curly braces. Okay, then we have to provide the values, and the values we have to provide like this. There are 6 parameters, then we have to add 6 question mark. This is the basic syntax to add a new object over there. 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. Fine, so now let's try to rerun our, okay, let's quit it and rerun one more time. Fine, and we have our app.js file. Okay, let's come over here. Okay, we have to do one more thing, that we did not define our routes, so we need to define that also. We have as of now the get route only, so let's define our another route, that would be a post method, and there we have to create a new project, so that is router.post, and the endpoint would be create. Okay, and the project and rest of the thing, what we have to change, we have to call our second use case, that is create project, which we define inside our controller create project. We can use over from there. Fine, create project, and we have to do one more changes, is that inside your app.js we have only this use case, get all project use case. We have to also add our another use case, that is create project. So firstly what we have to do, we have to import that use file over here, so that is create project. Okay, create project use case, and let's rename it to use case slash create project use case. Okay, now let's create an instance of that object, that is create project use case, and this will take fine. Now we can pass inside our controller the another use case, that is create project use case, and in our controller in constructor what we have to do, we have to also pass this another variable, that is our create project use case, so that we can pass over the next part of our application, like we can call inside our data repository part. So let's try to add one more controller method over here, that is responsible for creating a new project inside our application. So let's rename it to create project. Okay, this will take a request and response. In this scenario we need also a request parameter, because we have to create a new project. Okay, so what we will do, we will create an object, that is project category, and let's say we have all the, over here we will pass the body from our request, and assign, let's where we have our repository part. Here we will copy all these fields and paste over the here. So the next thing what we have to do, the next thing we can do, we can add some basic validation, like though some fields cannot be empty. If this field is empty and you are trying to hit up a create method, then you will get an error, like you can be, your title could not be empty, your description could not be empty like that. So let's do that. Copy it here and add a negation mark over each parameter which you want that could not be null. If we added all the condition over here, fine, and added with or, and remove the comma from over here. Okay. Once you have done, if this condition is not satisfied, then in that scenario what we will do, we will simply return a response with error, with response with status code. We can say as of now 400, and we'll parse a JSON with error field. Okay, and in error we will say that missing required field, so that user can know that they have to fill this field, otherwise they can't be proceed further. Okay, and if this condition is satisfied, then we will proceed further. Firstly, what we will do, we will, let's copy this method, or we can simply delete it, the try part. Here what we have to do, we have to filter our project ID. We create a new variable called project ID here. Okay, and then, or what we can do, see, in our create project we have our request.body and we pass here. Okay, and we are checking out all the variable. If this condition is not satisfied, okay, we have, okay, in our try part, let's try to call our repository method, that is, let's this dot create project use case. What the method is there, if you see, we have this use case method over here. Okay, so we will use this and call our execute method. Execute method required what, if you come over here, this needed 6 variable, because we need to pass from our project controller. So what we will do, if you see project routes, let's close this. Firstly we need to pass the ID, and then if you see here, let's copy from over here, you come here and paste it here. We have a ID, we have title, then description, then image URL, and then project URL, then project category. Okay, so now what we can do next, and we pass this, and we will add await keyword here because this is in future method, and will store result in variable, let's say that is project ID simply return. Okay, and in response what we will do, we will return a response with the status code 200 or 201, whatever you want. With JSON, in JSON what we will return, an object, we will return ID with our project ID. Fine. If you are getting an error, then we will simply return our common error which we return inside our get method. So that's it. Okay, let's review one more time our code. Inside create project we pass our request body. Okay, we initialize the project, then we are checking the basic validation that this field could not be empty. If this is missing, then we are throwing an error that missing field required field. If everything is fine over here, then what we will do, we will add a try catch block. In try block what we are doing, we are calling this use cases method, create project use case. Okay, and there we pass all the parameters which are required to execute that method, and once this is executed, then we returning status code 200 with ID, whatever the return. Okay, so let's now come on our project routes part. In project routes part, we have post create method, create project. We calling our create project this method from our controller. And now let's see, inside our app.js file, we added our create project use case at the top, and now we have create an instance of our create project use case called the repository, and in controller we have our get all project and create project use cases. Okay, so now let's try to a post method inside our post method. Let's try to add a simply create and see what we're getting. It's saying that missing required field, so we have to add a missing required field which are required to perform this action. So we have to add all the fields which are required. Okay, let's see what the field we have to add. If you come over our project controller, we have a title. Okay, let's copy from here. Okay. And in our parameters, okay, we have a body. Inside body, we can pass a raw data. Let's change to text to JSON and add this one. Okay, what we can do, simply we have a get. Okay, let's firstly we will get it, and we will simply copy paste the object we will get in our response. Okay, let's see what we will do. We will simply copy this response and we'll change to post, and let's make it to create, and in our body we will simply edit this and we'll change this to different ID, and let's do a different title, and the description is something like this. Add some project URL, this and this, and let's try to hit this. We are getting internal server error. This dot project usage execute is not a function, so we need to debug this. Okay, come over your use cases. What the error was? Internal server error, type error. This dot create project use case dot execute is not a function. Okay, we are getting an error that project is not a constructor. Okay, if you come over here, project controller, let's see inside project. Okay, you can see that we misspell it here, and we also need to export our module, so we'll use module dot exports and we'll give the name that it's project. Okay, let's try to rerun one more time, and this time pull dot execute not a function. Okay, see, come on over here, project repository, and here we do not. Okay, let's add a variable, const variable, where we will store the result whatever we will getting once we call this. Okay, so let's add in inside our project id. Let's give a variable called project id. Okay, wait, we are here, or we can rename to result also, like in our previous, and let's make it an object, and simply we will return the result. Okay, so let's see what we have inside our controller now. Inside our controller we are extracting the body, then we are perform some basic validation, then inside the try catch block we are calling our use cases method and passing all the required fields. If this is true, then we are returning our response, and if we are getting an error, then we are throwing error with 500 status code. Let's try to rerun one more time. We are getting an error, pull dot execute is not a function. Okay, you can see that we have misspelled it here. We have to add e also, pull dot execute, the method is execute. Okay, so now try to rerun one more time. I hope this time it's worked. So now we are getting this response. So we successfully insert affected rows. You can see one means we are successfully enter this object inside our database. We can verify. How we can verify? We will copy this and open inside our new tab, and inside of create we will use a get and try to hit and find what the title was, this, and id is 29. Let's search is if this is there or not. You can see we successfully added. Fine. So in next part, what we will do, we will see how we can delete existing project from our database and how we can update some project over there. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the upcoming part we will continue that thing. Okay, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. In our last video we completed our create part. So in this video what we will do, we will start writing the use cases for delete the existing project and update the existing project if we need to update some field of our project. So let's start to write our next use case, that is delete. So inside your use case folder, add a new file called delete project by id use case.js. Okay, we already have this. Okay, I have this created. Now let's create a class called delete project by id use case. Now what we will do, we will define the constructor of our use case. This will take a parameter that is our repository. Let's copy this constructor from here simply. Fine. And the next thing is that we have to define a method inside our delete project use case that would be execute, and make it asynchronous because we have to call our server inside our execute. We will define the body over here. So in execute we need a parameter that is id. Basically we need to delete a project by identify the project id. By help of project id we will delete that. You can also take some more parameters, like you can take titles or description or whatever you want, but we will delete by using id. Now inside our body what we will do, we will call our repository method that would be delete project, and that will take id. So now what we have to do, we have to define this delete project method inside our repository. So come before that what we will do, we will export this class at module exports and give the class name. Fine. Now come on project repository. Here we will define another method which we use inside our delete project by id use case. This will take a parameter that would be id. This is also a asynchronous method. Fine. And here what we will do, we will call our data source method. So what we will do, we will call MySQL data source, and the method we will use execute modification query method, and this will take a two parameters, query and params. Let's define that. So let's define a variable called query, and here we will write down our query which we need to perform. Okay, the next parameter is params which we need to pass, that is params which will come from our parameter. So here we have a id, so we will assign this inside our params variable. Okay, now let's define the query. What the query would be, we want to delete, so the query would be delete from where we want to delete. We want to delete from projects table, and what the identifier is id is equal to this. Okay, now we will pass our query in our method and the second parameter as a params. Fine, we are executing this query and passing this parameter as an id once, and this is asynchronous. Then add await in front of that, and we'll store the output in result object. Okay, and at the end what we will do, we will return our result once we successfully delete that particular thing. Fine. So next thing what we have to do, we create a use case to delete our file project. Then we add a method inside our delete project, inside our repository delete project. Now what we have to do, we have to add inside our controller. Inside our controller we need to add one other method. So what we will do, we'll create a new method, delete project. So we will copy this method and what rename it to delete project. This will take request, this will take two parameter, request and response. And what we will do, we will remove this from here, and now we will write our try block here. So what the thing we have to do, let's see what we, let's create firstly what we will do, we will create our object over here, const, there we will have id. This will get from our request body. Okay, and here we will perform some basic validation like the id could not be null. If this is null, then we will throw an error that you could not delete that project. You have to provide the id which you want to delete. So we will send response dot, we will return the status with 400 and pass JSON. And in field error what we will do, we will say that id is required. Okay, once this is done, once our verification part is done, and if the id is not null, then we will come inside our try block. Okay, so now here what we will do, we will call our method which we define inside our use case, that is delete project. So what we have to do, we have to add our use case in the controller constructor. So add one new parameter, that is delete project by id, and in this side constructor body. Okay, fine. Now what we will do, let's remove this delete project by id. Here we will call the use case and the method which we have inside that, and we'll pass the id because the id is required on that particular method. If you will see, if you see inside your project delete project use case, it's there is a one method execute which required id. So we need to pass this from our controller also. So we have project controller, so we call this method execute, and now this is also asynchronous method. So we will add await keyword in front of this and store the result in a variable. Okay, so let's create a variable called project id, and we'll store the result inside this variable. Fine. If this is done, then we will return our we do not need to return here, we will just create what response. We will return response return status with 201 status code, and the JSON we want to return is that id. We will pass this project id. Well, this project id, let's copy this and paste it here. Okay, so we completed our try block and the catch block. In the catch block we will return the same thing. Fine. Now the next thing what we have to do, we have to define a new endpoint for deletion of our project. So come on project routes file. Here we will define a new path. So copy this request.post method. This is also a post method, rename create to delete. Okay, now we will call this our dependency, our use case, that is not a use case, controller method. Go inside project controller, what the method name is delete project, so we will call this method from here. Fine. So now we have completed this routes files also. Now let's come on app.js file. Inside here what we have to do, we have to also import our newly added use case, that is delete project by id use case. So let's copy this method. Okay, now let's copy this import statement and rename with delete project by id, and let's import that use case, that is delete project by id use case, and let's create an instance of that use case. We'll copy this line and paste it here, and this would be delete project by id, and this will use this okay, delete project by id. Now we can pass this use case inside our controller, because inside our controller constructor we have a three parameter, that is get all project use case, create all project use case, and the third one was delete project by id. Fine. So we have done now the delete part. Okay, let's try to see if we are getting an error here. So let's come on our postman one more time and try to see if we are able to delete or not. So open it, our endpoint, let's see the 1.1 more time inside our app routes, that is delete. Okay, let's try to get all the project first. Let's find out id 22. Okay, let's see, we want to delete this id 22 object from our database. So let's rename to delete, and let's rename to post, and inside our body, okay, we have this, let's rename it to, we just need to pass id here, remove all those stuff from our body, and instead of create we will do delete, and let's try to delete it. If see we are getting nothing, okay, let's try to see we are getting id 22 over there or not. Okay, let's see, response was get id 22 is deleted now. Fine, but you can see we are not getting anything, so let's fix that response part. So let's debug it. Okay, once you come inside your use case, we are not returning here while calling our execute method. So now let's try to delete id number 6. So let's replace with 6. Now let's try it. So yeah, we have affected row 1, we got the proper response. And now let's find out id number 5. This is not present now, so we successfully added the delete part also. So now what we will do, we will write our next use case, that is update our existing project. So let's create a new file called new file we will create over here. What the use case would be, let's say that would be update project use case.js. Fine, let's create a class that is update or what we will update project use case. Fine, now what we will do, we will copy the constructor which we previously created, because that would be same. And here also we will firstly, what we will do, we will export the firstly and give the name of model. Okay, now let's define our method that would be execute. Okay, and let's say this will be asynchronous because we have to talk with server, and over here we will call our method. Let's call this, and will at the end we will return this dot project repository, and our method would be update project. That would be update project. Fine, this execute method will take some parameter which we took inside our create project. So let's copy from there and add it here, and let's create a new entity of new updated entity. So let's copy the same object which we created previously, new, we will see this time new updated project, and we pass over here. So now what we have to do, we have to define this update project method inside our repository. Okay, so now come on this repository method, repository file, and over here what we will do, we will define a new method. We will copy this and paste it here and define the name of our method, that would be update project. This will take a project, updated project. So now what we have to do, okay, let's update our query first. That's this, we have this project parameter and we create object by using this, and then we have a query, we need to update our query in case of our update project. So what the update we have to perform, what we have to modify, we have to modify something like that. Let's remove this, and the query would be update what from where, from our projects table. And what we need to set, we want to set that title would be new, which we get from our field, and the description, let's copy it, description would be new, which we'll get, and all the other things. Project url, project category, let's copy it and we'll replace, and at the end we also where we need to provide the id, where the id would be this, which we get from our request. Fine, so we are update what from where, from project table, and we set the title with our request body, description, image url, project url, project category, and we identify by id. Fine, we have done from here. Now what we will do, we have parameter title, description, image url, we have to add this id at the end now. Okay, so rest of the thing would be same. So what we did, we create a new use case to update our projects, then we define our new method inside our update project, inside our repository, we define our update project new method over here. See, now what we need to do, we need to come on our inside our controller, we need to define one more method to update project. So what we will do, we will simply copy this create project method and we'll paste at the end and rename it update project. Fine, now there are some modification we need to do inside our update project method. So what are that, we have our body, we pass our body, we create inside a new object, and we are checking that this could be not null. If this is now missing there, then we will throw an error that missing required field, and we are calling our method create a project use case. So in this place what we have to do, we have to add one new field here, that would be our new use case, that is update product, update project use case. We'll call this use case inside our last method. So let's add inside our about constructor update product use case, and we have this update product use case method, and we call this use case, and the execute method will be there. Fine, and the rest of the thing would be same. So the next thing what we have to do, the next thing we have to change our routes file. We have to add a new route. So in our case, what we will do, we will add a new route, request.post. In this case, that would be update, and what we have to call on, we have to call a new method which we define inside our controller. Okay, so what was that? Let's see, that was update project. So we'll add it here, update project, sorry. And now what the last thing we have to do, we have to come on our app.js file. We have to import the new use case, that is the update project. So let's copy this and we'll paste it here and rename to update project, and we'll give the path of our file where this use case is, that is update project use case. Let's create a new instance of that. Let's create a new instance, that is update project use case. Fine, and let's add it, let's rename it update project. With this, we create a new object of our update project use case. So let's pass this inside our project controller constructor, because we added a new field inside our constructor, that is update project. Okay, now everything is done. Now what we have to do, we have to come on Postman. We'll see if everything is working or not. So let's come on Postman. We have, let's get one more time, we have on project ID 7, we have this title CICD. Let's try to update this. So come on another tab, we'll copy paste the thing, let's rename with updated method. Okay, and the rest of the thing will be same, we will not change that. Fine, now let's try to hit send. On send button, there is affected as wrong. We successfully updated our queries. Let's try to rerun our get command and see if this is updated or not. So find the 7 number. Okay, we didn't change the endpoint, we have to add here update. So let's add update on another project ID, let's say that is 9. Let's copy this, we will rename our endpoint to update, and let's see ICD with updated. Fine, and let's remove the comma. Now let's try to resend one more time. Missing required field, it's saying that missing required field. So let's see what the issue is. It's saying missing required field. So let's add our project URL also, image URL also, and project category. Now let's try to read that. It's saying that project is not defined, so I think we misspelled somewhere inside our use case. Update project, update project here. Let's see what we did wrong. Okay, now let's come on our project use case. Here we didn't import the entities, so that's why it's saying that project is not identified. So what we have to do, we have to import a project over here from our required path. So let's skip the path. This is inside entities, that is project, entities slash project. So fine, now let's try to hit one more time and see if we are getting an error or not. So you can say this is affected or tools. So we have two project with ID 9. So let's try to get API one more time, and let's find out ID 9, and here you can see our title is updated. So fine, so we have done with update part also. So we completed our CRUD operation. We see how we can write API for get, create, delete, and update. So in the next part, what we will do, we will add to one more method for filter, where we provide some ID or the name of project category. On the basis of that, we will get all the response. Fine, so that's it for this video. In the upcoming video, we will continue that part. So yeah, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. In the last video, we completed our CRUD operation. So in this part, what we will do, we will write our last use case, that would be get all project by filter. Okay, so let's create a new use case, that is get projects by filter. Let's rename it get projects by filter .js. Okay, let's name of our use case get projects by filter. Okay, now let's try to import it first, otherwise we will forget it. We will let's export it, sorry, otherwise we will forget, then we will get some error at runtime. So let's define a constructor of our class. This will also take same as previous. Let's copy from there, and here also we would have a method, one method that would be asynchronous, and the method name we can define as execute. Okay, so in method body, what we will do, we will call our project repository and the method, the responsible method. But in this case, we also need a parameter that would be filter parameter, and let's call our method from repository, that would be get project by filter. get project by filter, and we'll pass this filter parameter to that, and let's rename to get projects by filter. Now what we have to do, we have to define this method over inside our project repository, and at the end what we will do, we'll return this. Okay, so let's copy the name of our method from our use cases, and now come inside our project repository, copy the name of method, and we'll define over here. This will take a parameter filter, and the method would be asynchronous type. Fine. So let's define our project, and let's define the query first, because we have to pass the query inside our data source method. So let's name a variable called query, and we'll define the query. What we have to do, we have to select what we need to select. Select all, and select star from where, from our project tables, where we are saying that where our project category, this time our project category field should be the provided filter, and this is our query. We defined our SQL query here. Now we create an object for parameters from our filter. Okay, we create a variable params with object of filter. Fine. Now we can call our MySQL data source method, that is execute selection query, because we do not need to perform any operation over here. So we will call the method that is execute select query, and select query also take two parameters, that is first one the query and the second one is params, that is asynchronous method. So we have to add await over here, and the result we will add inside a variable const rows and assign the value, and at the end what we will do, we will return our result, whatever we will get. Fine, we completed our repository part. So next thing what we have to do, we have to define a new method inside our controller. So open our controller file and create a new method, that is get project by filter or project by filter. Okay, let's remove the space here, and that would be also asynchronous. Let's define a method called get our projects by filter. So this will also take two parameter, that would be request and response. Okay, and let's try to create a new object, pass our, okay, let's say that is project category, and we will get from request dot query. This time we will not get from body, we will get this from query, because we are performing this. Okay, so next thing what we have to do, we will check this project category is provided by user, then only we will proceed further, otherwise we will throw an error. So let's see how we'll do that. We'll copy this and check. If this is not provided by user, then we will say that please add a required field and pass this method. If this is validation part is completed and project category is provided by user, then we will add our try catch block. Let's what we will do, we will simply copy this, our get one part, get all rejects all project one part, and paste it here. And there are some changes we need to do. We have to add our new use case, that is get projects by filter. Okay, the use case name was get project by filter. So let's add it here, get projects by filter. We'll add inside the constructor body this dot is fine. Inside our method project by filter, we'll use a use case get project by filter and call the execute method, and the execute method this time will take some parameter, that is project category, will pass inside here. Fine. Then rest of the thing would be same. In the error part we will return 500 and say that internal server error as of now. So this is done from the controller part. Now what we have to modify, we have to add a new route, that would be project by filter. So let's define that. Let's copy the first parameter, the first method, that was get method, and add it over here only, and rename with get project by filter, and we have to call our newly created method inside a project controller file. Inside project routes we will call this projects by filter. This is done inside our routes file. We have to modify our app.js file. For what we have to do, we have to import our use cases over here. So let's copy it, line number 8, and we'll paste it here, rename it to project by filters, projects by filter get. Let's add get projects by filter, and we'll add a required path, that is get projects by filter. Let's create an object of that use case. We'll copy this and we'll paste over. Okay, we'll copy this line and we'll paste here and rename it what is that, get projects by filter, and we'll call this module. Fine. Now we will pass our newly use case inside our controller, because we have added one more parameter inside our project controller, that is get projects by filter. So we added there. So we completed this part also. Let's try to run on our postman and see if we are getting or not. So let's try to run get method one more time. So we have this. Okay, let's try to add a filter, that we want the project category which have let's say we have project category this. and we have any other project category SSS. Okay, so let's add a new project category. We have to add inside a parameters that is project category, and the value is this. So let's add the value here and try to rename the method here. That is, let's copy from our routes, get projects by filter. Okay, we will copy over here, get project by filter, and let's try to send it. Okay, you can see your project is filtered. Now we have only now we only have those objects which have project category this. Okay, so we completed this part also. So we completed almost our backend part. Now what we have to do, we will deploy this on server and for production use case. Okay, so for deployment we are going to use render. So go on render.com, then you can log in through a GitHub. Once you log in through GitHub, there is a new button. Tap on this new button, then tap on web service. Once you tap on web service, then select this option, build and deploy from a Git repository. Then you will select this your repository where your code is. Okay, once you connected, then you are good to go. Now let's see what the things we have to select. Like I already deployed it. Let's see, go inside setting. You have a several questions. The name of your web service, you can give any names. Like my case, I give a portfolio app API. Okay, if I want to edit, I can do it, but I will not do that. The region you can select it, and then we have a build and deployment type where we have to define the repository which we need to give. Then there is here we have to give the default branch which we want to trigger when we make any commit to run. Then we can also give the root directory in the build filters. We do not need to anything in the build command. By default there would be yarn selected. Now we need to make change to npm install. Okay, and then the start command, we will do this node src and the app.js file, because our starting file was app.js. We need to make changes here, and then at the end we will do auto deploy as yes. Okay, and this are the setting things which you need to do that while you deploy it on render.com. Fine, this is the deployment part. Once you're done, you can see the logs here. You will come on logs, you will see the last log which will run here. Okay, you see that our deploy is successfully done. Now for our server, what we are going to use, a clever.com. So this is also we will connect with GitHub. Okay, let's connect. Okay, here also we will add a new create. We will tap on create to add a new database, then tap on add and add on, or create, tap on an application, create a brand new app, select a GitHub repository. The same process would be there. Like I added there portfolio app backend. If you see, come back here, expand it, portfolio app, tap on this portfolio app, and there is the conditional which you need to provide in your render.com, the database name, production database name, the user, the password, port number, this one, and the production database. If you see here in your render.com, let's see where all that. Here there is an environment section. Inside your environment section, you have to give the values of your keys, name, database name, password, port, and user from your this one clever console. Once you completed that, then we are good to use these APIs. Okay, so I will add this API in the description of this video, so you can directly use this if you are facing any problems for a upcoming part of this project, where we will build the client side part in Flutter. So that's it for this video. If you have any confusion, let me know in comment section. We'll try to solve it. So yeah, that's it. Thank you. From the next part, we will start the Flutter part. Okay, yeah, thanks.